Right, patients as partners in assistive technology design. So Sarah and I are going to introduce ourselves and be presenting fairly soon, but I believe we have a few questions for you to start out. So if our helpful tech people could add them on, there they go. Who thinks users should be included in the design of technology? I'm hoping that's going to be 100%. Let's see. You need a Jeopardy sound. Oh, there we go. Thank you.
Oh. Yay!
Yay! 100%. All right, next question. Have you been involved in the design of technology? Ooh, those numbers looking pretty. Come on, a little bit more. 33% say yes, so that's a very good start. I'm proud of some of the technologists here, and others could do a better job. And our next question, please. If yes, was it a positive experience? Oh, not for everybody. 85%, 83. Oh no, we're losing. 82%.
Going down.
So for some people, it's been an expositive experience, but sometimes it's not an expositive experience, and well, we'll talk about some of those reasons today. So just to get us started, so brief introductions. My name is Cecily Morrison. I'm principal researcher at Microsoft Research in Cambridge, and most of my work looks at where the boundary of AI or artificial intelligence meets with human experience and how we bring and design those things to work together. I have a second hat, perhaps even more of my time as a parent. I'm a parent of a blind child and ophthalmic child, so a child born without eyes, and therefore have come at a lot of what I do with multiple perspectives. And we're doing a bit of a double act with Sarah, so she can introduce herself.
So my name is Sarah Leiter. I was born with albinism, which is a rare condition that causes a visual impairment. I first actually met Cecily through her little son, I guess, and involvement in a local sports club. I'm also working as a junior doctor at Addenbrookes, and I'm one of the trustees of CRDN. And yeah, I was initially, met Cecily and Ronan, and then got involved as well with a research project at Microsoft.
So we've been involved with 2 years working on a project, nothing in technology, even technology which is fast, especially on the research side of things. That work is still not quite ready for us to talk about yet, not the right stage, maybe the next conference. So we're going to talk about a little bit about some of the excitements, the challenges that we face, but using a slightly different example. That example is called Code Jumper, and I'm going to show you a short video to introduce what it is. Project Arena is a physical programming language that allows children ages 7 to 11 who are blind or low vision to access the computing curriculum.
Students learn, if I take this device and plug it into this device and plug it into the hub, that creates a loop. It could be music, so they may be able to loop a couple notes together. They can create a repeat, they can add additional notes. The possibilities are endless.
The huge benefit of Torino is it's a physical environment. The students can actually touch and manipulate the different elements that make up the programming environment.
Each pod is a statement in your program. It's one line of code. You then put those pods together to create those lines of code in your program. Many of these kids come in with a whole set of skills ripe for computing. Yeah? And we just need to give them the tools that allow them to grow that talent.
Programming is an ideal potential job opportunity for visually impaired people. They actually make up approximately 1% of the programming community worldwide.
It's either the top one or the bottom one.
It's the bottom one you need to change.
It's an environment that will work for any student that is a tactile learner. Because it's accessible, it allows you to immediately engage with the concepts of programming. It allows you to immediately create programs that work.
If this one was on 8 and that was on 1, this one would play because the number is higher.
Particularly in this case, where there's quite a specialized market, we needed to partner with someone who really understood that market and really understood how we would get a quite advanced technology into the hands of the kids that it would be most impactful for. APH know how to do that.
Microsoft handed us this project name of Torino, and we decided on the name Code Jumper. And they said, take all this research and time and energy and money we've spent and help us get this into the hands of students and be a partner with us.
Our hope is that we inspire all blind and low vision children to code regardless of where they are.
I think we only need 2 because then the next one there's more than 1 note.
Yes.
Then we put a pause in between.
Yes, that's fine.
There's been lots of light bulb moments where they've suddenly understood a concept, where they've been able to track through the program physically as it's running. So they've been really enthused about Project Torino. And as a teacher, that's what you want to see in your students. You want to see that level of enthusiasm to learn more.
It is an active, hands-on learning, hitting at those most concrete and operational levels for a student. And I think it's just the beginning of what's to come for this field.
So, I didn't start out, I led the team that designed this, and I didn't start out planning to do this project. In fact, it's always been one of those on-the-side kind of things, although I'm happy to say it's about to launch in the next week or 2. And we want to talk a little bit about how we came to do that and how the kids that we involved in that process came to create something very different than we would have created as researchers on our own. So it all started as a parent of a blind child. About 18 months, I put my head up and thought, okay, I'm tired of looking at genetic reports. I'm tired of surgery. I'm tired of the health domain. What's the future? The future, I thought, is education. Great. So let's look around. Why do you educate these kids? Someone showed me a braille. I don't know if you've seen them. They're about this big and put it on the table. And I was like, oh, can you actually carry that? It seems a little bit heavy. And I think the interesting anecdote of how that experience was is that friends came over and the son said, what's that? And the mother said, oh, it's like a typewriter for people who are blind. And they went, typewriter, what's that? And I thought that's exactly the way I was feeling as a technology designer, that the technology available to my child was not really of the same generation as the technology that I was building in my day-to-day job. So I thought, wouldn't it be really interesting if we took a whole bunch of blind and low vision kids and we trained them how to design their own technology? What kind of technology would they come up with? And that was the start of this project. And the image that you see here is this is a little Arduino board you can use for prototyping, and it turns light into sound. And we use this to help kids learn about the design process, see what they would create for themselves. So just a few ideas. Some of them are pretty amazing, actually. There's this young girl on the left. She has a very unusual condition where none of us know what she can see, but depending on the light, really depends on what she can see. So she built herself a censored hat, which sort of moves around and always creates the perfect light, so she can always see. Pretty useful, I thought. Another child, not pictured here, he had a device that showed him where the windows were for his 100-room castle. His mom pointed out it was imaginary. And he had just learned that sighted people liked windows, and he really shouldn't put people in his castle who had sight in rooms without windows. So he needed to know where the windows were. So his little device is going to do that. So very, very different things. Really excited about design. But we kind of got to the end of the day. You know, my job was done. I go back to my day job. And the parents called me up next week. I had 3 of them in 1 week going, okay, my child's defined something else. They want to code. Okay. Really not sure how we're going to do that. But, you know, I love Cambridge because at Cambridge you phone up someone you've known for a couple of, doing my PhD, and then I phoned up someone else saying, do you know any languages that we could use to teach kids to code? No, not really. Have you tried this? No, I don't think that's going to work. And through this process, finally over lunch one day, one of my colleagues went, I don't think there's anything there, but really it can't be that hard to build. We should just build it. And that was the beginning of this project. And I think I just want to pause there for a moment. And Sarah heard this story. She said to me, you know, we're all, when you have a rare condition, we're all rare, but in some ways we're all the same. And just let her reflect on that.
Yeah, I think the rare conditions, you know, in my case, it's a rare eye condition, but actually there are so many other rare eye conditions that actually it brings together a group of people. It brings together a group of people who've all got visual impairments or blindness to varying degrees. And actually, I think sometimes as patient groups, we need to unite a little bit. And actually, in this case, in particular, when thinking about technology, if we all struggle with vision, how can we make something that's accessible that will help somebody with albinism, but also somebody with retinitis pigmentosa, or somebody like Cecily's boy who was born without eyes? So can we make one piece that can work across different rare conditions which have a common feature?
So the way we did that is we invited 4 of these children, 3 who were desperate to code and 1 more who just came along for the ride. And we we said, okay, we're going to create this experience with you. You're part of our design team. So they're bigger now, but they were about 7 or 8 at the time. And we as researchers were very boring. We said, okay, well, the way you teach kids to program is you put blocks on a screen, so let's put blocks on a table. You see on the left-hand side, there's a whole bunch of 3D printed blocks. We're very proud of ourselves. And they came, they lined them up in a row, and then they folded their hands. And I was like, that's really not very engaging, is it? So we brought them back, and we said, okay, what is exciting to the hands? You guys are experts in the tactile world. Show us what's exciting to the hands. So they get out their materials and they started to create things. We started 3D printing stuff together. We learned lots of things really quickly. Magnets fall apart, things that are round roll off tables, things that are square get stacked. And very quickly we came to some designs and some shapes of things that could excite the hands. But I think what's really exciting about that was that as experts of what excites the hands, it excites their hands, but it excites the hands of all children. And we've just seen with a deployment of this technology in the States, in Washington, where this is now being used in mainstream, it works for all kids, not just for them. So is there anything you want to say about that?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point to make. So especially if you're thinking about designing technology, designing kit, that if you only make it work for one specific group of people, you will never have a market, and also you will never actually allow social inclusion of the children. But by making something that will work for the visually impaired child, but also for their sighted classmates and can just be used by everybody, you're creating this nice broad platform, and you're not singling out the person with the disability, but they're just one of the kids.
So to make a very long design story short, where we got to is we went from blocks on a screen, from blocks on a table with a big X, to could we create beads, with each bead doing a different command in your program. And that was the concept that we brought. And that brought us then to, after several iterations of technology, to something that looks like this. I'm not going to explain in detail because we don't have a lot of time. But I want to mention one thing about involving, in this case, kids, but users generally in the design process, which is always an interesting but a tricky thing. And my training is a lot of what I do. But I think the story I have with Theo was that Theo didn't like the materials that we used on some of those things. And he came up to me one day and he said, I told you that you should do it this way, and you haven't done it that way. And this really opened up an interesting conversation with us, because we had to explain to Theo that, all of the things that he brought to us that he probably couldn't see, like the shape, the way he used his hands, were key to what we had built. But on the same time, we also had to balance a lot of practical things. Like if all of those knobs have to come out of a mold, and if they're not built in a particular way, when you come out of the mold, they're going to crack. So our technology would not be very robust. So we had to take some of what they did and then try and put that into something that we could actually build. And I think for me, it was also a lesson in saying part of the design process isn't just to take from them, but also to help them feedback about what it is that we've taken and what we've learned, so they can understand how we've brought those decisions together. A, because then they can input even better into them. And B, as we have multiple design processes, Theo's a child that we are now working with on another technology, he now understands that process, so he's in a very different place now and able to give us the kind of insights that we need to build really great technology.
And I think that's really important, that on the one hand, as a user, don't try and guess what I want or what we need. And I think that happens quite often. It's quite a paternalistic attitude sometimes. But actually, first of all, open that platform up to say, what do you want? What do you need? Where do you need help? But then actually, as Cecily's nicely said, it's a two-way process. So I might have this fantastic idea that just doesn't match reality. But actually, it's a two-way conversation rather than just designing a technology without without incorporating the user from the beginning.
So I think one of the things that we thought about while we were designing, at first we just thought, could we make this work? That was in itself an interesting challenge, a good one. But I think then we said, okay, well, making it work is one step, but actually making it possible for everybody to use is another one. So alongside having actually built it, we then said, well, we need a whole set of materials that go along with it that help non-specialists. In this case, our non-specialists are teachers, they might be parents, they might be teaching assistants, they might be teachers of the vision impaired, just about anyone who might be handed a blind child and said, teach them coding. You think that's a really funny thing to do, but actually that's often how it works. So we created that, and what was really interesting to us is then we trialed it in the UK with, see how many we had, about 75 kids across the UK. was that how this really interesting balance of support and flexibility. So the teachers, it actually worked really well. We had very good learning outcomes. And we found then looking at how the teachers did it, the support they had of having those learning sort of curricula and scheme of work there was really important. But then the flexibility to make it work for their child, because those children were all very different. Some were 7, some were 12, some had additional disabilities, some were particularly able, some just didn't like music. So they were all in different places, and we were really impressed with how the teachers were then able to manage that to make something that worked specifically for their child. So in one part of the country, they took all of our exercises and they changed them all into pop tunes. So they re-recorded all the programming exercises as pop songs, and they taught that way. In another place, they had a child who would only deal with the ambulance. So the teacher then went out and got, I thought this is amazing, because my child loves ambulances too, 25 different ambulance sounds, and they programmed only with ambulance sounds. And sort of the ingenuity of having this sort of broader platform, which allowed them to really, with support, make it possible for their kids to learn.
And I think that's really important because at the beginning I said, actually, as rare disease patients, sometimes we have things that bring us together and that, where we share common challenges. But actually, we are still all individuals. And I don't want to have 50 pieces of tech around to something that you do with just one piece. I want to be able to just use something that, first of all, my peers can use as well, but also something that can be adjusted to the way I need or want to use it.
So I'm just going to stop there. If you do want to know more about it because you want to learn to code, codejumper.com. And we're then opening up to questions in a moment. And I'll just close on the design process. So someone who works in technology but deeply embedded in design is really important for me. The way we bring people together, those people might be patients, users, healthcare professionals, they might be all kinds of people in the process. In this design process, we had to actually bring in the manufacturer side as well. That was quite interesting. I'd never done that before. And I use very much often something called inclusive design. And I've just put up a link. Oh, it's come off the page. Microsoft.com/design/inclusive. There's a whole toolkit if you've never done design before, which takes you through a whole set of activities that you can do, which help people come to the same stage to start to think about how we progress these things together and what are the trade-offs that we face. So there we'd like to open up for questions.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you both. As if by magic, a list of glitter questions appear before us.
So the question is, how best to bridge the gap between physical tools for programming concepts and tools needed to develop real-world technologies? I'm going to interpret that as how do you take kids who are doing physical programming at the age of 7 or 8 and turn them into people who create their own technologies of the future? Does that sound like a good interpretation?
I think that's...
Yeah.
Not there
Okay.
too, so.
I guess some of the background that we had left out was that one of the exciting things about programming now is it's part of the curriculum from age 7. And what was happening is that while we had a lot of blind and low vision people programming of the previous generation when they started to learn to code when they were 16 or 17, now that their sighted peers were learning at age 7, we needed something alongside them at age 7. So we couldn't use text-based languages with assistive technologies. They weren't quite ready. But what we have done is we have a whole transition thing within CodeJumper to help kids move from physical to text-based. That would happen we expect that to happen around the age of 12. And we then hope they're off on their career, although I have to say, part of my role at Microsoft, I spend a lot of time on the inclusive hiring. We hire into my team a lot of people who are blind and low vision, and I think it's a whole, you need to get the whole thing working.
So very sort of direct, do you have a website, or can people find out, how can people find out more about this?
Right, so codejumper.com, or you can just search CodeJumper and it will come up. Have you found a way to successfully include kids with PMLD in the design process? These look like they're mostly questions for me. There's quite a lot of research.
Could you just say what PMLD is for the benefit of the audience, or perhaps the person who asked the question could? Profound and multiple learning disabilities.
Yeah, that's such a tricky one, because where do those boundaries come in? They're definitely, I personally haven't worked officially in that space, although my own son is also quite tricky and he's been part of the design process. And there are a lot of techniques that can make that work, and there's no reason why it shouldn't work. It's just about thinking about what is the expertise that they can add. And I think sometimes when people are unskilled in the design process, they kind of dump all of the design onto the users. I think that's not a particularly helpful way to do it. We have to think about our role as technologists is to build technology. Their role is to bring their expertise to us, and how do we enable them to bring their expertise? The first thing is, what is the expertise that they can bring to us?
And I think we've time for just the last one. Is this system already commercial? Can people buy it?
You can find on codejumper.com a way to almost pre-order. Pre-order should come out in the next week or two. We've handed over to American Printing House for the Blind, which is a non-profit, who will be taking it to market. So I don't have a particular view as exactly when things happen, but I know pre-orders are coming very, very soon. It will be available in the UK before the end of the year.
Well, thank you both. Thank you to Sarah and to
Thank you.